Welcome to session 16, Portfolio Management. In my executive seminars on corporate finance for companies, participants usually ask for a session on portfolio management or personal financial management. The question would be, are the principles of corporate finance that we have learned in the course applicable to personal financial management? And my answer typically would be yes, those principles are applicable. This is what we will discover in this session. In this session, I'll try to convey the essence of my book, Investment Analysis and Portfolio Management, 5th edition. This is a fairly long work running to nearly 900 pages, meant primarily for MBA students taking a course on investments or investment professionals. However, the ideas of the book can be conveyed in a relatively non-technical and intuitive manner for the benefit of a wider audience, and this is what I plan to do in this session. This is in line with the nature of this program as well. In a way, this session is dedicated to money, for the wonderful things that you do for us, the terrible things that you do to us, and all the gray matter in between. The session outline is in the form of 10 commandments. 1. Take charge of your investments. 2. Start saving early and save regularly. 3. Know how the various asset classes compare. 4. Give top priority to an adequate cash reserve, suitable insurance cover, and a residential house. 5. Specify your target mix for stocks and bonds. 6. Invest sensibly in mutual funds and other collective investment vehicles. 7. Invest on your own if you have the skill set and temperament. 8. Check your irrationality. 9. Invest in alternative asset classes if you can. 10. Maximize your lifetime financial success. As Warren Buffett, perhaps the most successful investor of our times, wrote, to invest successfully over a lifetime does not require a stratospheric IQ, unusual business insights, or inside information. What is needed is a sound intellectual framework for making a decision and the ability to keep emotions from corroding that framework. In this session, we'll discuss that intellectual framework. Of course, emotional intelligence has to be provided by you. Many people find investing to be a very challenging and difficult task. They are bewildered by the profusion of investment alternatives. They're daunted by the presence of mighty financial institutions. They're unnerved by the volatility of the market. They're rattled by the scams that periodically surface in the market. They're confused by the complexities of investment strategies, and they're confounded by the intricacies of tax system. Investment need not be so daunting and challenging. Investment can become a rewarding exercise if it is approached in a systematic manner. I hope to convey to you this message that you can manage your investment sensibly if you develop your skill over a period of time. Yes, you can get advice from experts and advisors, but there is always a potential bias in expert advice. Experts are primarily interested in enhancing their income and only secondarily interested in serving the interests of their client. Often we find that people suggest products and strategies that bring them more commission rather than further the financial interest of the client. Even if the experts do not have this bias, most experts lack capability. I have come across thousands of experts in the last 50 years, and I find that very few people have genuine expertise in the field of investment. I divide forecasters into 3 categories. Don't know category. These are people who don't know. These are people who don't know that they don't know, and these are people who know that they don't know but pretend that they know. These are the pundits which appear frequently on TV channels. In their heart of heart, they know that they don't know, but they pretend that they know. I've been in this category for a while, many years ago, and I realized that when you are asked to comment on TV, you have to somehow give the impression that you are an expert, you are a pundit. But in my heart of heart, I knew that I did not know. What does it mean? It essentially means that you have to rely on your wits because genuine expertise is rare. This is what you will have to do over a period of time, gradually build your understanding and skills in managing your portfolio. As a first step, you have to prepare your financial scorecard and define your goals. One great secret of investment success is that there is no secret. My experience is that complex investment strategies do not work. When you take charge of your investments, the first thing that you should do is to prepare your financial scorecard. Just the way a business firm has a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet, an individual also has a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. The individual profit and loss statement shows income and expenses and the net surplus or deficit between income and expenses. As far as income are concerned, there are two sources of income, active sources and passive sources. Active sources are salary, professional income and business income. Passive sources are pension and annuities, interest, dividend, rent, capital gains and royalties. In the earlier years of one's life, active sources predominate. In the later years of one's life, passive sources predominate. As far as expenses are concerned, they may be classified into basic expenses and discretionary expenses. Basic expenses include expenses on food, clothing, housing, healthcare and insurance, children's education, basic transportation. Discretionary expenses include foreign holidays, expensive gifts, and lavish celebrations. As far as the assets of the individual are concerned, the most important categories are liquid assets such as bank deposits and liquid schemes of mutual fund, debt instruments, insurance and retirement products, real estate, equity, and other. Net worth and liabilities consist of short-term liabilities such as credit card loans, car loans, long-term liabilities such as housing loans and loans for purchasing property. The balancing item is the net worth of the individual. The investment decisions of an individual are influenced by financial goals, investment personality, investable resources, and investment avenues. As an investor, you know your goals, your personality, and your resources better than anybody else. So you have to take charge of your investment decisions. You need guidance on investment avenues from experts. You also need guidance when you find it very difficult to comprehend the relevance of certain products for your specific circumstances. However, the primary responsibility is yours. We have a variety of financial goals. For someone who has just started working, the immediate priority may be to acquire a car or some vehicle. There are other goals that follow, such as marriage, house, children's education, children's marriage, own venture, retirement, charity, and bequeathing. Every individual will have to specify his or her goals and develop an investment plan to achieve those goals. One can be more specific in defining the time dimension and essentiality of various goals. Here is an illustrative table showing various goals, their time dimension, and their essentiality. Goals against which E is marked are regarded as essential goal, and other goals are regarded as optional goals. The objective of portfolio management is to maximize the probability of achieving your financial goals without exposing yourself to risks that you are uncomfortable with. More generally, the objective is to build your financial strength so that you achieve financial independence as early as possible in your life. Barring luck over which you have no control, your investment success depends on these factors: thrift, independence of thought, discipline in the form of rules, realistic expectations, and common sense. My experience in portfolio management has taught me few basic lessons. Less is always more. Simplicity trumps complexity. The conventional gives you much better odds than the exotic. A long-term process is more important compared to short-term outcomes. Perspective is more important than tactics. The thrust of this session is on investment, not speculation. Let us distinguish between the two. The planning horizon of an investor is at least 1 year. The planning horizon of a speculator is very short, 1 day, few days, few weeks. The risk disposition of an investor is low to moderate. The risk disposition of a speculator is usually very high. The return expectation of an investor is usually modest. The return expectation of a speculator is very high. The basis for decisions for an investor is usually fundamental analysis. The primary basis for decision for a speculator is technical analysis. The investor rarely, if ever, uses leverage. The speculator uses leverage along with own funds. As the legendary Benjamin Graham observed, an investment operation is one which, upon thorough analysis, promises safety of principal and an adequate return. Operations not meeting these requirements are speculative. There are three kinds of knowledge in the context of finance and investment: financial facts knowledge, facts about financial markets, institutions and instruments, benefit of diversification, difficulty in outperforming the market; human behavior knowledge, knowledge about varied needs that drive investor behavior, knowledge about biases and errors that investors are prone to; information knowledge, knowledge that is exclusively available to CEO and a few trusted lieutenants; knowledge which is narrowly available to top management and firms which have a close interaction with the corporation; knowledge which is widely available, knowledge which is in public domain. The thrust of our discussion will be on understanding financial facts knowledge, human behavior knowledge, and using this knowledge along with widely available information or knowledge which is in public domain to craft a sensible portfolio management strategy. We do not have access to exclusively available information or narrowly available information. Of course, those who have access to this information can earn superior returns because of their informational edge. We do not have that edge, so we have to rely on these things in order to craft a personal portfolio management strategy that serves our needs. To start saving early and save regularly. The key equation of investment performance is savings plus return plus time minus taxes is equal to results. Here is a recapitulation of the key formulae for time value of money that we learned in an earlier session. Future value factor is 1 plus r raised to the power n, where r is the interest rate and n is the period of compounding. Present value factor is 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to the power n. Future value of an annuity factor is 1 plus r raised to the power n minus 1 divided by r. Present value of an annuity factor is 1 minus 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to the power n, the whole divided by r. Present value of a perpetuity factor is 1 divided by r. Let us apply these formulae. We have learnt about the power of compounding. Here is a very simple illustration. If you save 10,000 rupees at the end of each year for 40 years and your investment generates a return of 8%, then your savings over a 40-year period would accumulate in value to 2,590,560. If you're fortunate to earn a return of 18% thanks to a combination of high skill and luck, your investment of 10,000 at the end of each year for 40 years will grow in value to 41,632,000. This is the power of compounding. You may be wondering why your ancestors were not so far-sighted. I hope you will show concern for posterity. Changing retirement scenario. 1. Increase in life expectancy. Today, life expectancy is 10-15 years higher than what it was 30-40 years back. 2. Changing nature of pension system. Before 2004, the government of India had a defined benefit pension plan, which means that the pensioner was assured of a certain income in real terms for his or her entire life. After 2004, when National Pension Scheme was introduced, the shift has occurred to a defined contribution plan. Individuals have to contribute into the NPS, and the returns generated by the pension fund would determine the kinds of benefits that they would get in future. 3. Disintegration of traditional family structures. Most of the families are becoming nuclear families. 4. Higher standard of living. The standard of living today is much higher than what it was 20-25 years ago, and it is likely to go up in future. 5. Greater volatility in returns. What are the broad implications of the changing retirement scenario? 1. Larger retirement corpus. 2. Higher savings. 3. Deferment of retirement. 4. Living in retirement communities. 5. Reverse mortgage of residential property. 6. New annuity products. The legendary Benjamin Graham wrote a very simple sentence: live well within your means. I have expressed this sentence in two different ways. Live well within your means. Live well within your means. These are two very useful ways of looking at how one should handle money. I may add one more. Save where you can, spend where you must. To save more, you must refrain from conspicuous consumption. Conspicuous consumption means that you buy things that you don't need with money that you do not have to impress people that you don't care about. Developed by a psychologist, here is an interesting chart showing the relationship between money spent and happiness generated. You can derive a lot of happiness from activities like playing with kids, doing voluntary work, reading a book, playing cards, walking in sun, enjoying a joke, listening to music, and so on, which cost very little money. At the other end of the spectrum, you can derive a lot of happiness by engaging in activities which cost a lot of money. In between, you have activities which cost a significant amount of money and generated a high level of happiness. By organizing one's life in such a way that one can derive a lot of satisfaction from doing activities which cost very little, one can save a lot. The happiness emotional equation is expressed beautifully here. Happiness is equal to wanting what you have divided by having what you want. In other words, happiness is equal to gratitude by gratification. If we are grateful for what we have, we tend to be happier. If we constantly yearn for things that we don't have, if we pursue illusory gratification, our happiness diminishes. So we must be grateful for what we have rather than constantly yearn for something that we don't have. 3. Know how the various assets compare. The most important investment attributes are return and risk. Other attributes that also matter are liquidity, tax shelter, and convenience. How various asset classes compare. For individual investors, the most important asset classes are cash, which includes cash, bank deposits, and liquid schemes of mutual funds; bonds, which include corporate bonds, government securities, debt-oriented mutual fund schemes; contributions to provident fund, public provident fund; stocks include direct investment in equity shares and indirect investment in mutual funds and other collective investment vehicles; real estate includes residential property, commercial property, and so on. The return, risk, and convenience characteristics of these asset classes are shown here. Cash provides low return, carries nil risk, offers high convenience. Bonds provide medium return, carry low risk, offer high convenience. Stocks provide high return, carry high risk, and offer high convenience. Real estate offers high return, carries limited risk, provides very low convenience. If we look at the history of investment returns from stocks, bonds, and cash over a long period of time, we find the following picture. Average returns on stocks have been higher than the average returns on bonds, and average returns on bonds have been higher than the average returns on cash. Volatility of stocks has been higher than the volatility of bonds, and volatility of bonds has been higher than the volatility of cash. Volatility of returns from stocks decreases as the measurement period increases. Returns from cash and bonds can be forecast with a certain degree of certainty. Returns from stock market, however, cannot be forecast so easily. Stock market return depends on an interaction of two factors, investment returns and speculative returns. Annual stock market return over a period of n years, SMRN, is the sum of investment return and speculative return. Investment return in turn is the sum of annual dividend yield over n years plus annual earnings growth over n years. Speculative return depends on the shifts in the price earnings ratio. It is defined as PN, which is price earnings ratio at the end of n years, divided by PO, which is price earnings ratio at the beginning of the n year period, raised to the power of 1 by n minus 1. Investment return is somewhat easier to forecast than speculative return. The above procedure may be illustrated with a numerical example. Suppose you want to forecast the annual stock market return over the next 5 years. You have estimated that the annual dividend yield over the next 5 years would be 2.5%. Earnings growth over the next 5 years would be annually 12.5%. The price earnings multiple after 5 years is expected to be 18. The current price earnings multiple is 20. The forecast annual stock market return is given by this calculation. The investment return would be 0.025 plus 0.125. So it works out to 0.15 or 15%. Since the P ratio is expected to shrink from the current 20 to 18, the speculative return would be negative, and the calculation is shown here. 18 divided by 20 raised to the power of 1 by 5 minus 1. So the speculative return is minus 2.1%. So the total stock market return annually over the next 5 years is expected to be 12.9%. What happens if the expected P after 5 years would be 22 rather than 18? What is the forecast annual return? In that case, the stock market return would be higher. The investment return, however, will remain at 15%. The speculative return, instead of being a negative 2.1%, will be a positive 2%, because price earnings ratio for the market is expected to move up from 20 to 22. Many argue that there may be a structural shift in equity returns in India going forward. For the past 30 years, the consumer inflation rate in India has been 8 to 9%, and the nominal GDP growth rate was 14 to 15%. This was reflected in Sensex returns of about 15%. The structural shift in consumer inflation to 4 to 5% essentially means that the nominal GDP growth rate is likely to be in a range of 11 to 13%. Equity returns also will be in line with this. 4. Give top priority to an adequate cash reserve, suitable insurance cover, and a residential house. Here are some simple rules of thumb. 1. Maintain a cash reserve which is at least equal to 6 months of your living expenses. Life is uncertain, so you require a contingency fund to meet unforeseen requirements. 2. Have a health insurance cover for yourself and your family. 3. Buy a term insurance plan which is at least 10 times your annual income. If your annual income is 30 lakh rupees, buy a term insurance plan for 3 crore rupees. A term insurance plan provides pure insurance. It does not have any saving associated with it, and it is available cheaply. Remember, the purpose of insurance is to provide protection to your family should you decide to migrate to some other planet prematurely. The purpose of an insurance plan is not to accumulate a certain corpus over a period of time. Endowment policies are policies which are aggressively sold by insurance advisors because endowment policies generate greater commission for them. You find here that there is a conflict of interest between an insurance advisor and the beneficiary of an insurance policy. Endowment policy premium is divided into two components: savings component, which is a very large portion of the premium, and the insurance component. On the savings component, you earn a very meager rate of return. It is better to buy a term insurance plan and invest your saving component in some other form which provides a higher rate of return. The need for life insurance depends on one stage in life. In the young adulthood stage, financial requirements or dependence is none, available resources elsewhere are negligible, and the need for insurance is absent. In the family formation and development stage, financial requirements or dependence is high, available resources elsewhere are meager to modest, need for insurance is high. In the pre-retirement stage, financial requirements or dependence is modest, available resources elsewhere are substantial, and the need for insurance is diminished. In the retirement stage, financial requirements or dependence is small, available resources elsewhere are large, and the need for insurance is absent. If you are reasonably certain of settling down in a certain place, a residential house should be accorded top priority for the following reasons. One, it offers a fairly attractive post-tax return after you take into account rental savings, capital appreciation, and tax benefits associated with loans. 2. It has limited risk exposure. 3. Financing is available in very convenient form. 4. Psychic satisfaction is derived from home ownership. 5. Specify your target asset mix for stocks and bonds. After meeting your priority needs, your most important decision is to determine the asset mix for stocks and bonds. The three levers of investment performance are asset allocation, market timing, and security selection. Asset allocation is concerned with long-term mix of stocks and bonds. It is also referred to as the strategic mix of stocks and bonds. Should your long-term mix be 50% in stocks, 50% in bonds, or should it be 75% in stocks and 25% in bonds, or should it be in some other proportions? This is the most important decision in terms of impact on investment performance. Market timing is concerned with short-term departures from strategic mix. Suppose you have decided that your strategic mix should be 50-50. However, you find the market is currently overvalued, so in the short run you may like to reduce your exposure to stocks from 50 to 40 and increase your exposure to bonds from 50 to 60. On the other hand, if you believe the market is currently undervalued, you may in the short run increase your exposure to stocks from 50 to 60 and reduce your exposure to bonds from 50 to 40. Security selection is concerned with the selection of specific stocks and bonds to be included in your portfolio. You can adopt a very passive approach by subscribing to index funds, or you can subscribe to a very active approach by selecting these securities on the basis of your analysis. Empirically, it has been found that asset allocation has a dominant influence over long-term performance of a portfolio. Asset allocation accounts for 86% of long-term performance, whereas market timing and security selection account for just 7% each. Yet people are preoccupied with market timing and security selection most of the time. I often get calls from my friends and relatives asking whether it is the right time to enter the market, whether it is the right time to exit the market, which are the stocks one should buy, which are the stocks one should sell. They are focused on market timing and security selection. This is understandable. As human beings, we want to control our destiny. As human beings, we want to compete with others in the marketplace. As human beings, we want to outperform the market. These are usual tendencies that we find among investors. However, one must recognize that market timing and security selection have very limited impact on long-term performance. If you're obsessed with market timing and security selection, you are likely to be very active in managing your portfolio. Your turnover is likely to be very high, and you are likely to fall victim to many behavioral traps. It has been found that people who focus more on market timing and security selection in general underperform broad stock market indices. Hence, recognizing this empirical reality, investors should focus on getting the asset allocation decision right. What assets should one include in the portfolio? What should be the normal or policy weights to hold these asset classes? The two key determinants of asset allocation are one, investment horizon, and two, risk tolerance. Investment horizon. If your investment horizon is long, your portfolio should be tilted in favor of stocks. If your investment horizon is short, your portfolio should be tilted in favor of bonds. Stocks tend to be very risky in the short run, but much less risky in the long run. 2. Risk tolerance. If you have a high tolerance for risk, other things being equal, your portfolio should be tilted in favor of stocks. If you have a low tolerance for risk, other things being equal, your portfolio should be tilted in favor of bonds. According to a popular rule of thumb, allocation to bonds must be equal to one's age. For example, if a person is 25 years old, 25% of financial portfolio should be allocated to bonds and 75% of the portfolio should be allocated to stocks. Likewise, the stock allocation is 100 minus age. If a person is 25 years old, stock allocation should be 75%. This popular rule of thumb is flawed because it confuses living horizon with investment horizon. What is living horizon? What is investment horizon? Living horizon represents one's residual life. If a person is young, living horizon is long. If a person is old, living horizon is short. A person who is 20 years has many years to live, maybe 70, 80 years to live. A person who is old, say 80, has 10, 20 years to live. So living horizon represents residual life. Investment horizon, on the other hand, represents the time period that would elapse between investment and the time when investment proceeds are required to fulfill a certain goal. For example, an 80-year-old lady who has a gaggle of grandchildren and who has a decent pension income may have a long investment horizon if she wants to bequeath her wealth for the benefit of her grandchildren. While her living horizon may be 10, 15 years, her investment horizon may be 50, 70 years because she wants to bequeath her wealth to her grandchildren. Likewise, a person may be 80 years old, and if he is wealthy and he wants to donate the bulk of his wealth for a charitable cause which has a long investment horizon, the investment should be made primarily in stock. So one has to distinguish between living horizon and investment horizon, and one must be guided by the investment horizon, not living horizon. Often there is a discrepancy between real investment horizon and psychological investment horizon. Real investment horizon represents the horizon when our needs have to be fulfilled, whereas psychological investment horizon is the horizon that we are psychologically comfortable with. In a buoyant market, psychological investment horizon lengthens. In a depressed market, psychological investment horizons shortens. Our asset mix is often influenced by our psychological investment horizon when it ought to be influenced by our real investment horizon. Why should a longer investment horizon imply a higher allocation to stocks? The reason is stocks tend to become less risky as the period of holding increases. Here is a graph which shows the range of return on common stocks or equity stocks in the US over a period of time. In this graph, we find that for 1 year holding period, the range is very wide, but as the holding period increases, the range of mean rate of return decreases. what you find is that while the range declines, the mean rate of return remains more or less stationary. So if you have a long investment horizon, you should invest heavily in stocks because stocks tend to become less risky in the long run. Does that phenomenon hold in India? Sure it does. I have here data on Nifty 50 index from 1990 to 2020. If we look at 1990, year ending Nifty value was 331. It moved to 559 at the end of 1991, providing a return close to 68.9%. We have annual returns for the following years. The returns that we are talking of here are capital appreciation or depreciation. As we have learned, there are two components of annual return: dividend yield and capital appreciation. Dividend yield, of course, is a very small portion of total returns. In India, I guess dividend yield currently is less than 1.5%. So for our purposes, if we work with the capital appreciation or depreciation, it should suffice. Based on the data given in the previous exhibit, this table has been prepared. This table shows the maximum rate of return, the minimum rate of return, and the mean rate of return for different holding periods. We have data on 1 year holding period, 2 years holding period, so on and so forth, going up to 21 years holding period. As far as 1 year holding period is concerned, the maximum rate of return is 75.76%, the minimum rate of return is minus 51.79%, the mean rate of return is 17.58%. As far as 2 years holding period is concerned, we have 29 observations. The maximum value is 52.56%, the minimum value is minus 15.42%. The mean average annual rate of return for a 2 year holding period is 16.74%, so on and so forth. When it comes to 21 years holding period, we have 10 observations. The maximum value is 19.23%, the minimum value is 14.77%, and the mean average value is 16.65%. When we look at this table, we find that the difference between the maximum and minimum rate of return declines as the holding period elongates. However, the mean rate of return remains more or less within a very narrow band. A vivid picture of the same phenomenon is shown graphically here. As the holding period elongates, the range of returns diminishes, whereas the mean remains more or less the same. In more formal terms, if the standard deviation of return over a 1 year period is 30%, the standard deviation of return over a 2 year period would be 30% divided by root 2, which is 21.21%, and standard deviation of return over a 5 year period would be 30% divided by root 5, which is 13.42%, so on and so forth. In general terms, standard deviation of return over an n-year period is equal to standard deviation of return over a 1 year period divided by root of n. While the expected return remains more or less the same, the standard deviation of return declines over a period of time. Thus, variability of average return diminishes with the holding period. As we have seen, when the holding period is 1 year, standard deviation of return is 30%. When the holding period is 5 years, standard deviation of average return is 13.42%. However, this variability compounds over a longer period. A disappointment of one standard deviation will affect the terminal wealth by a factor of 1 minus 0.1342 raised to the power of 5, because the holding period is 5 years, which is 0.487. This certainly is a larger impact than 30%. As Bodhi says, while the confidence band around the expected rate of return narrows with investment life, the dollar confidence band widens. So there is no benefit of time diversification. The above critique of time diversification is mathematically correct when returns are serially independent. Yet, we can resurrect the principle of time diversification on two practical grounds. One, There is evidence that stock returns are not serially independent but tend to mean revert over long intervals. This means the dispersion of terminal wealth increases at a slower rate than what is implied by serially independent returns. 2. You may be more inclined to accept more risk over a longer horizon as you have greater scope to adjust your consumption and work habits. It must be emphasized that the real returns, that is inflation adjusted returns on stocks, are characterized by mean reversion, whereas real returns on bonds are characterized by mean aversion. The mean reversion of real stock returns implies that the actual risk of stocks declines faster than the theoretical risk. In sharp contrast, the actual risk of bonds declines more slowly than the theoretical risk as the holding period increases. This means that real bond returns display a mean aversion tendency. They wander from the mean value rather than be drawn to it. This is because bond real returns are critically influenced by inflation, which accumulates over time. The implication of this has been stated very well by Jeremy Siegel of Wharton. Finance theory is thus presented with a conundrum. Stocks are riskier than bonds in the short run, but are actually less risky in the long run. The optimal allocation of one's portfolio cannot be divorced from the holding period of the investor. To understand the risk tolerance of a client, investment advisors usually administer a questionnaire which has a number of hypothetical questions. These questions are meant to gauge the risk tolerance of the client. Here is a very simple questionnaire which has just 5 questions. Each question has 3 possible responses. Question 1: my investment is for the long term. The end result is more important than how I go about achieving it. 3 responses. 1. Totally disagree. 2. Can accept variability but no loss of capital. 3. Agree. Question 2. What is the importance of current income? 3 responses. 1. Essential and must be known. 2. Essential but willing to accept uncertainty about the amount. 3. Irrelevant. Question 3. How much decline can you accept in a single quarter? 3 possible responses. 1. None. 2. Some. 3. Unimportant. Question 4. How important is it to beat inflation? 3 possible responses. 1. Preservation of capital and income is more important. 2. Important. 3. Essential. Question 5. How important is it to beat the stock market over up and down economic cycles? 3 possible responses. 1. Critical. 2. I prefer consistency. 3. Irrelevant. If a person has answered 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 in all the 5 questions, the total of that individual will be 5. On the other hand, if a person has answered 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 in all the 5, the total of that person would be 15. And if a person has answered 2, 2, 2, 2, 2 in all the questions, his total would be 10. A person who has a total of 15 has a high tolerance for risk. A person who has a total of 10 has a moderate tolerance for risk. A person who has a total of 5 has a low tolerance for risk. Questionnaires of this kind are popularly administered. However, they are crude tools for assessing risk tolerance because the risk tolerance of an individual tends to change over a period of time. The risk tolerance depends on the mood in which the individual is, the context in which the individual is taking decisions, the immediate past experience of the individual, the anticipations and expectations of the individual. The same individual may display high tolerance for risk in a certain situation and low tolerance for risk in another situation. So such questionnaires should be viewed with a little bit of skepticism. However, they are crude devices to get a first cut on risk tolerance. To understand whether you are an aggressive, moderate, or conservative investor, answer this question. How much money can you afford to lose if the market falls? If you can bear an erosion of 50% of your portfolio value, You are an aggressive investor. If you can endure a 25 to 30% loss in your portfolio value, you are a moderate investor. If you can tolerate only 5 to 10% decline in your portfolio value, you are a conservative investor. Three factors seem to have a bearing on risk tolerance: ability to take risk, willingness to take risk, and need to take risk. Ability to take risk in general depends on investment horizon. Suppose you are planning to retire after 20 years, then retirement related investment can be invested heavily in equities. You can go up to 100% equity allocation for such investments. On the other hand, if you are planning to get your daughter married after 5 years, then you are able to take risk with investments relating to daughter's wedding goal is limited. The maximum equity allocation allowed in that case may be just 20%. Willingness to take risk depends on the maximum tolerable loss that you can endure in percentage terms in a year. If the maximum tolerable loss that you can bear in a year is 5%, then you cannot have more than 20% exposure to equities. If the maximum tolerable loss that you can endure in a year is 50%, you can have up to 100% equity exposure. Need to take risk. If a person has to achieve a higher rate of return in order to accomplish a certain goal, he or she would have to take a greater exposure to equities. On the other hand, if a person can manage with a lower rate of return to achieve a certain goal, he or she need not take much exposure to equities. If we assume that bonds in general provide a rate of return of 8% over a period of time, and equities provide a rate of return of 15% over a period of time, the equity allocation that is recommended given various rate of return requirements for meeting financial goals is shown in this column. Risk as feelings. In their widely cited work on risk as feelings, psychologists Lowenstein and others argue that emotions often drive much risk-taking behavior. Prior to their work, risk-taking was supposed to be guided by rational thinking. They, however, maintain that risk-seeking behavior is not driven by an expectation-based calculus. Instead, they propose a new theoretical framework which they refer to as the risk as feelings hypothesis. Drawing on research from a variety of subfields of psychology, they demonstrate that emotional reactions to risky situations often diverge from cognitive assessments of such risks. With such divergence, emotions often drive behavior. Risk as feelings hypothesis explains a wide range of phenomena that have defied interpretation in cognitive consequentialist terms. Personal blueprint. In his book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, Ekar says that we all have a personal money blueprint ingrained in our subconscious minds. More than anything else, it is this blueprint that determines our financial life. Often people do not have a healthy relationship with money. Some of the unhealthy ways of dealing with money are miserliness, compulsive generosity, conspicuous consumption, exhibitionist expenses, and compulsive gambling. Every investor is unique. People vary in terms of age, wealth, income spending, risk tolerance, investment goals, knowledge of investing, interest in spending time on investing, access to information, and so on. Just as every person has a unique iris, a unique fingerprint, and a unique DNA, every investor is unique. Here is a very useful matrix for determining the appropriate stock bond mix for any given goal. In this matrix, there are two dimensions: time horizon and risk tolerance. Time horizon may be short, 0 to 3 years, medium 4 to 9 years, long 10 years or more. Risk tolerance may be low or moderate or high. The numbers given in various cells represent the percentage of portfolio to be allocated to stocks. The balance represents the percentage to be allocated to bonds. When time horizon is short and risk tolerance is low, 0% of the portfolio should be allocated to stocks, which means 100% of the portfolio should be allocated to bonds. At the other end of the spectrum, when the time horizon is long, and risk tolerance is high, 100% of the portfolio should be allocated to stocks and 0% of the portfolio should be allocated to bonds. Very few individuals are in this cell. Perhaps Warren Buffett belongs to this cell. He says his entire wealth is invested in stocks. On the Indian scene, there is an investor called Rakesh Jhunjhunwala who claims that his entire wealth is invested in stocks. These are individuals who have a very long time horizon and a high tolerance for risk. Most of the investors will perhaps fall in other cells. If you're not sure about the cell to which you belong, a good default option is this cell, 50-50 cell. Invest 50% in stocks, 50% in bonds. If you are not too sure about the cell to which you belong, over a period of time, as you gain more experience with your assessment of risk tolerance and a better understanding of the time horizon of various goals, you can move to other cells. I have found this tool very helpful and I recommend it as a starting point for stock bond determination. Benjamin Graham says that a 50-50 version makes good sense for most investors for the following reasons. One, it is simple, everyone intuitively understands and accepts that principle. Two, it moves the investor in the right direction. If the market is overpriced, the investor is advised to book profits. When the market is underpriced, investor is advised to buy stocks. Three, it gives investors a feeling that they are moving in response to market developments. Four, it imposes a discipline which is very essential for sound portfolio management. John Bogle, an investment legend and the founder of the Vanguard Group of mutual funds, has offered guidelines on asset allocation, taking into account the age and the specific phase, accumulation or distribution of the investment life cycle. His recommended asset allocation model is given below: age, older age, younger age, specific phase of investment life cycle, accumulation or distribution. If a person is young and is in accumulation state, the recommended mix is 80% in stocks and 20% in bonds. If a person is old and is in the distribution phase, the recommended stock bond mix is 50-50 and you have other proportions for other cells. The key to investment success lies in choosing the asset mix that is best for you after considering the following factors: your financial situation, assets, income and savings, your age, your emotional strengths, particularly at market highs and lows, and your attitude toward risk, your knowledge of and interest in investing. For the sake of simplicity, we assume that there is a single investment horizon. In reality, an investor may have multiple investment horizons corresponding to varied needs. For example, the investment horizons corresponding to various goals sought by an investor may be as follows: investment goal, buying a car; investment horizon 1 year, constructing a house; 5 years, achieving financial independence; 20 years, establishing a charitable institution; 30 years. Obviously, the appropriate asset allocation corresponding to these investment goals would be different. When multiple goals are involved, two broad approaches may be followed. The first approach is to set up different portfolios for different goals. The second approach is to create a single portfolio for all the goals. We'll examine both the approaches. A more sophisticated approach to goals-based investing is shown in this diagram. Various goals are listed. The time horizons applicable to these goals are specified, and the risk tolerances applicable to these goals are also specified. Here it is assumed that the risk tolerance may not be uniform for all goals. Risk tolerance may vary from goal to goal. Given these variations, investment allocation strategies are specified for various goals. The steps involved under the first approach are listed here. 1. List all goals. 2. Put a time against each goal. 3. Note today's cost of achieving the goal. 4. Project future costs taking into account the factor of inflation. 5. Choose an asset mix that is appropriate to the goal depending on how distant the goal is and what the risk tolerance of the investor is. Based on the asset mix, estimate the expected return. 6. Calculate monthly savings. Here some tricky calculation may be involved. You can use an online financial calculator. 7. Start investing. To illustrate how much must be saved and invested to achieve a certain goal, let us consider an example. Prakash wants to buy a house 5 years from now. Today's cost is rupees 20 million. The cost is likely to increase by 6% per year. So cost 5 years hence would be 20 million multiplied by 1.06 raised to the power 5, which is 26.76 million. Prakash will have to make a down payment which is 20% of this, which works out to rupees 5.35 million. Prakash considers an asset mix of 50% in stocks, 50% in bonds appropriate for this goal, which is 5 years away. The expected return on this asset mix is 10% on an annual basis. Very roughly on a monthly basis, it is 0.83%. To find out the monthly saving, we multiply A, which is the monthly saving, by future value annuity factor. Here the interest rate per month is 0.83% and the period of annuity is 60 months. Future value annuity factor works out to 77.36. So A is multiplied by 77.36 to get 5.35 million. So A works out to 69,160, which means to achieve this goal, Prakash will have to save and invest 69,160 every month. Many people want to plan for retirement and bequeathing simultaneously. Further, they want to protect the corpus in real terms and bequeath it to their heirs. To understand how investment planning is done in such situations, let us look at an example. Deepak Dave is a 40 years old software engineer. He owns a flat and currently has financial assets of rupees 8 million. If he were to retire today, he will require rupees 8 lakhs for the kind of lifestyle he has in mind during retirement. He is, however, 20 years away from retirement. During the next 20 years, he expects the inflation to be 6% per year. So the annual income that he'll require after 20 years would be rupees 8 lakhs multiplied by 1.06 raised to the power 20, which is rupees 2,565,708. What should be the corpus that he should have at the time of retirement if the corpus earns 8% post-tax return and the inflation rate is 5% and he wants to protect the corpus in real terms to be bequeathed? How much should he save every year for the next 20 years if his savings earn 10% post-tax return? Remember, he already has rupees 8 million with him. To determine the corpus required at the time of retirement to provide a real return of rupees 2,565,708 per year, let us first figure out the real rate of return earned at the corpus. The corpus would earn 8% post-tax rate of return in an inflationary environment where the inflation is expected to be 5%. So the real rate of return would be 1.08 divided by 1.05 minus 1. It works out to 0.0286, which means 2.86%. So the corpus required will be 2,565,708 divided by 0.0286. This is rupees 89.71 million. This means that if Deepak Dave has rupees 89.71 million at the time of retirement, he can generate an annual real return of 2,565,708 and ensure that the corpus is protected in real terms to be bequeathed to his heirs. Given his financial situation, how much should he save annually for the next 20 years to meet his retirement goals and bequeathing goals? Remember, his current wealth is rupees 8 million, and this will grow at the rate of 10% per year for 20 years. So this will grow in value to 53.82 million. He requires 89.71 million at the time of retirement. So he will have to ensure that he saves sufficiently over the next 20 years so that the savings grow in value to 35.89 million. There is a difference between the target corpus that he needs at the time of retirement and the future value of his financial wealth. So he will have to save annually an amount that will ensure that he will have rupees 35.89 million from those savings over the next 20 years. The annual savings A, assuming that the savings will occur at the end of each year, will be the value of A in this equation, A multiplied by future value of annuity, R equal to 10%, N equal to 20. This should be equal to rupees 35.89 million. When we solve this equation for A, we find that A is 626,556. This means that if he saves every year 6,26,556 and invests at 10% compound rate of return for the next 20 years, that stream of savings will accumulate in value to rupees 35.89 million. His current financial wealth of 8 million rupees will grow in value to 53.82 million. The two put together will ensure that he has a corpus of rupees 89.71 million at the time of retirement, which will generate a real return that is enough to meet his retirement requirement, and the corpus will be protected in real terms to be bequeathed to his heirs. We discussed a goal-based approach in which a separate portfolio is created for each goal and the monthly investment to be made for that goal is estimated. Suppose we are interested in establishing just the overall stock bond mix for pursuing multiple goals. In that case, we can follow a slightly different approach, which we'll illustrate with an example. Praveen, a person with a moderate tolerance for risk, has the following investment goals. Goal: purchase a car, time horizon 2 years, amount required rupees 8 lakhs. Goal: down payment for purchase of a flat, time horizon 3 years, amount required rupees 40 lakhs. Goal: children's education, time horizon 15 years, amount required rupees 50 lakhs. Goal: retirement, time horizon 30 years, amount required rupees 200 lakhs. Praveen wants to invest simultaneously for all the goals. What should be his overall stock bond mix? To determine the overall stock bond mix applicable for the pursuit of multiple goals simultaneously by Praveen, we set up a table like this. In this table, various goals are listed, time horizons applicable to these goals are shown, and the amounts required for these goals are shown. Given a time horizon 2 years, which is a short time horizon, and a moderate tolerance for risk, proportion of stocks would be 0. Given a time horizon of 3, which is short time horizon, proportion of stocks would be 0. As far as these two goals are concerned, the time horizon is long, so the proportion of stocks would be 0.75. We multiply these amounts with these proportions to get the product. 8 multiplied by 0 is 0, 40 multiplied by 0 is 0, 50 multiplied by 0.75 is 37.5, 200 multiplied by 0.75 is 150. We add these and get a total of 187.5. We add all these and get a total of 298, which means the overall proportion of stocks in the portfolio would be 0.61. That means that the proportion of bonds would be 0.39. As we have learned, the primary determinant of long-term investment performance is asset allocation. Market timing and security selection have a very limited effect on investment performance. However, investors spend a lot of time on market timing and security selection. As far as market timing and security selection are concerned, investors can follow a highly active approach or a highly passive approach. A highly passive approach to market timing means that the investor adheres to the strategic asset mix all the time. Suppose an investor has chosen a strategic asset mix in which stocks are 50% and bonds are 50%. The investor will ensure that at all time the stock bond ratio is 50-50. On the other hand, a highly active approach to market timing may imply that the investor may increase the proportion of stocks from 50 to say 60 or 70 if the investor believes that the market is currently undervalued. On the other hand, the investor may decrease the proportion of allocation stocks to 40 or even 30 if the investor believes the market is highly overvalued. As far as security selection is concerned, a highly passive approach to security selection means that the investor will create a portfolio which mirrors a relevant benchmark index. On the other hand, a highly active approach to security selection means that the investor will select stocks entirely on the basis of his understanding of stocks which are likely to deliver superior returns, and they may be very different from what the stocks are in the relevant benchmark. When people review market fluctuations, they're tempted to play the game of market timing. A careful study on market timing has suggested that one has to forecast 75% of the time correctly just to break even. As the eminent financial economist Fisher Black observed, the market does just as well on average when the investor is out of the market as it does when he is in. So he loses money relative to a simple buy and hold strategy by being out of the market part of the time. 6. Invest sensibly in mutual funds and other collective investment vehicles like portfolio management schemes. Mutual funds are an immensely popular vehicle of investment in developed countries. Mutual funds have gained significant traction in India as well in the last 2 decades and will continue to grow in importance in the years to come. There are several advantages associated with mutual funds. Diversification. When you participate in a mutual fund scheme, you get the benefit of diversification. It may be inconvenient or very difficult for you to do such diversification on your own. Professional management. Mutual fund schemes are managed by investment professionals who are familiar with the nuances of investing. Many individual investors may not have such expertise. Liquidity. You can redeem units of mutual fund schemes and get your money in a day or two very easily. Assured allotment. Whatever amount you want to invest, you can invest, particularly in open-ended mutual fund schemes. Small investment, even small sums of 5,000 rupees can be invested in mutual funds. Tax advantages. Mutual funds are not taxed at the fund level, so the gains they make, the interest and dividend income they enjoy are not taxed at the fund level. Only when they are distributed or when an investor redeems units, there is a tax implication. So if you remain invested indefinitely in a growth oriented scheme, you can defer taxation indefinitely. Transparency. Mutual funds are perhaps the most transparent of financial institutions. When you participate in a mutual fund scheme, you know the portfolio composition, you know the expense ratio, you know a lot of details about your investments. No other financial institution offers this kind of transparency. While these advantages are quite compelling, there are certain disadvantages associated with mutual fund investing. Cost. When you participate in a mutual fund scheme, you have to bear the cost of investing. For example, the expense ratio for many schemes may be 1.5%, 1.75%, 2%, or even more. And that is quite a drag on investment performance. Suppose you participate in an equity scheme which delivers a return of 12%, but the expense ratio is 1.5. So out of 12%, 1.5 goes away, which is a very significant drag. Lack of thrill. When you invest directly, you can boast about your multi-baggers in a barbecue party. You may not have similar opportunities for boasting when you invest in a mutual fund scheme. You have to make a choice between investing on your own or investing through a mutual fund. Invest on your own if you find the game of investing enjoyable, have the time to manage your investments, can earn superior returns. Invest through a mutual fund if you think you need better advice on investing, find the paperwork relating to investments cumbersome. Investment orientation of mutual fund schemes. Mutual funds invest in three broad categories of financial assets: stocks, equity and equity linked instruments, bonds, debt instruments that have a maturity of more than 1 year, cash, debt instruments which have a maturity of less than 1 year, and bank deposits. SEBI has classified mutual funds into various categories: equity, debt, hybrid, solution-oriented, others. Under each category, various subcategories are indicated. Category equity, subcategories: large cap, large and mid cap, small cap, multi cap, dividend yield, value fund, contra fund, focused fund, sectoral, thematic funds, ELSS. Debt schemes are classified into the following subcategories: overnight, liquid, ultra short duration, low duration, money market, short duration, medium to long duration, dynamic bond, corporate bond, credit risk, banking and PSU, gilt fund with 10-year constant maturity, floater fund. The subcategories under hybrid schemes are conservative hybrid, balanced hybrid, aggressive hybrid, dynamic asset allocation or balance advantage, multi-asset allocation, arbitrage fund, equity saving. The subcategories under solution-oriented schemes are retirement fund and children's fund. Subcategories under other schemes are index funds and exchange traded funds and fund of funds. Equity schemes. Equity schemes invest the bulk of their corpus, 85% to 95% or even more, in equity shares or equity linked instruments, and the balance in cash. The more popular subcategories are listed here. Large cap schemes invest in large cap companies. Large and mid cap schemes invest in large and mid cap companies. Mid cap schemes invest in mid cap companies. Small cap schemes invest in small cap companies. Multi cap schemes are agnostic to market cap. Sectoral or thematic schemes invest in specific sectors or themes such as pharmaceuticals, infrastructure, and banking. Exchange traded funds and index schemes invest in a portfolio which mirrors the relevant benchmark. Tax planning schemes provide tax benefit to investors. SEBI has also defined the following terms: large cap, mid cap, and small cap. Large cap is 1 to 100 in terms of full market capitalization. Mid cap is 101 to 250 in terms of full market capitalization. Small cap is 251 onwards. Exchange traded funds have become very popular globally. They have gained traction in India as well in recent years. What is an ETF? Why have ETFs gained traction in India? An ETF is a hybrid of a closed-ended index fund and an open-ended index fund. Like a closed-ended index fund, it is listed on the stock exchange, and like an open-ended fund, it creates and redeems units in line with the rise and fall in demand. SBI ETF currently is the largest ETF in India. It tracks Nifty. Why have ETFs gained traction in India in recent years? The equity portion in National Pension Scheme and Employee Provident Fund Organization is required to be invested in ETFs. As a result of this requirement, operating expenses of ETFs have dropped dramatically. The operating expense may be as low as 7 or 8 basis points, making them a very attractive passive mode of investing for all investors. There are many different subcategories of hybrid schemes. The important ones are conservative hybrid schemes, which invest 10 to 25% in equities, 75 to 90% in debt; balanced hybrid schemes, which invest 40 to 60% of their total assets in both debt and equity; aggressive hybrid schemes which invest 65 to 85% in equity. Debt schemes account for a larger portion of the corpus managed by mutual funds. Debt schemes invest in debt instruments such as bonds and cash. There is a wide range of debt schemes. Here is a sampling. Gilt schemes or schemes which invest at least 80% in government securities. Corporate bond schemes invest at least 80% in highest rated corporate bonds. Liquid schemes invest in money market instruments which have maturities up to 91 days. Ultra short bond schemes invest in short term instruments which have a Macaulay duration between 3 to 6 months. Fixed maturity plans have a fixed maturity of say 390 days, 780 days, 1120 days and so on. Choosing the right debt fund. In India, debt mutual funds have to compete against attractive alternatives. Given these alternatives, here are some tips for choosing the right debt mutual funds. The bulk of your debt fund investments must be free from credit risk as well as duration risk. The average duration must be less than your investment horizon. Scrutinize carefully the quality of debt instruments in your portfolio. Avoid funds that invest more than 3% of portfolio in a single company or a group. If your primary goal is to preserve capital and earn a reasonable return on it, then invest in overnight funds and liquid funds. Key financial numbers. As a participant in a mutual fund scheme, you must understand the key financial numbers. Asset mix. This represents the allocation of corpus of a scheme across three broad asset categories, namely stocks, bonds, and cash. For example, the asset mix of a scheme may be 70% stocks, 20% bonds, and 10% cash. Net asset value. This is the actual value of a share or unit on any business day. NAV is defined as market value of the fund's investments plus receivables plus accrued income minus liabilities minus accrued expenses divided by number of shares or units outstanding. Repurchase and ratio price. The repurchase and ratio price of an open-ended scheme are very closely linked to its NAV. Discount. Closed-ended schemes typically trade at a discount over their NAV. Rate of return. The periodic rate of return on a mutual fund scheme is NAV at the end of the period minus NAV at the beginning of the period plus dividend paid during the period divided by NAV at the beginning of the period. X mark the extent to which the return of a mutual fund scheme is explained by a particular financial market. It is also called as R square. If R square is 0.90, it means 90% of the return of the mutual fund scheme is explained by a particular benchmark. Beta. Beta of a fund measures its price volatility relative to a particular stock market index. We have learned the concept of beta in an earlier session. We can measure beta for individual stock. We can measure beta for a portfolio. Portfolio turnover ratio. The churn in the portfolio is defined as lower of purchase or sales during a given period divided by average daily net assets. Expense ratio, the annual recurring cost as a percentage of the net assets of the scheme. Expense ratio is a very important number to be monitored because it represents a cost to the investors. Performance over time. Suppose a mutual fund scheme delivers a return of 5% in year 1, 10% in year 2 and 15% in year 3. What is its average performance over a 3-year period? There are three commonly used measures for assessing average performance: arithmetic mean, geometric rate of return and internal rate of return. Arithmetic mean is simply the sum of the three annual returns divided by 3, which in this case is 0.1 or 10%. The geometric rate of return is defined as 1 plus R1. R1 is 0.05 multiplied by 1 plus R2 multiplied by 1 plus R3, the whole raised to the power of 1 by 3 minus 1. It works out to 0.099 or 9.9%. The geometric rate of return is also referred to as the time-weighted return or investment return. Internal rate of return is defined as the discount rate which makes the present value of cash flows associated with a scheme equal to 0. It is also referred to as the dollar or rupee weighted return or investor return. To understand more fully the three measures, let us look at a simple example. A fund has been set up at this point of time. It garners 100 crores at this point of time. The fund delivers a stellar return of 100% in the first year, and the corpus grows in value to 200 crores. Seeing the extraordinary performance of funds, investors get excited and infuse 300 crores at this point of time, and the corpus swells to 500 crores. The second year, however, turns out to be disastrous, and the fund delivers a negative return of 50% and shrinks in size to 250 crores. The rate of return in year 1 is 100%. The rate of return in year 2 is minus 50%. Arithmetic mean is 100% minus 50% divided by 2, it is 25%. Geometric mean is 1 plus R1 multiplied by 1 plus R2, the whole raised to the power 1 by 2 minus 1. R1 is 100%, so it is 1, and R2 is minus 50%, so it is minus 0.5. So the geometric mean is 2 multiplied by 0.5 raised to the power 1 by 2 minus 1, which works out to 0%. As far as the internal rate of return is concerned, we set up a timeline like this. This is the amount poured in by the investors in the fund at this point of time. This is the amount infused by investors at this point of time, and this is the value of the corpus that belongs to investors at this point of time. So we set up an equation like this: minus 100 minus 300 divided by 1 plus r, because this infusion is occurred at this point of time, plus 250 divided by 1 plus r square. We solve this equation for r and we find that r is minus 32%. So internal rate of return is a negative 32%. Geometric mean is also referred to as investment return, and this is widely used to measure the performance of the fund or the fund manager. Internal rate of return is referred to as investor return, and it reflects the experience of investors. So we find a wide discrepancy between investment return and investor return, and this is a very common phenomenon because investors tend to join a scheme at a wrong time and exit the scheme at a wrong time. Dalbar, a North American research agency, analyzes every year returns individuals earn on their mutual fund investments and compares the same to market index returns. Over the period 1984-2013, they found that S&P 500 delivered a return of 11.1%. This is a geometric mean return over this period. The investment return or geometric mean return earned by actively managed funds was a shade lower than this. The investor return, which reflects the experience of investors in equity funds, however, was significantly lower at 3.7%. This corroborates the point that I made earlier. Brought out regularly by Standard & Poor's, SPIVA reports measure the performance of active funds vis-a-vis relevant benchmarks. SPIVA reports are prepared for various markets. The only robust analysis of Indian active mutual fund performance is SPIVA India report. It first appeared in April 2010. It is being issued regularly since then. SPIVA India report suggests that over longer horizons, the majority of actively managed large cap equity funds in India have underperformed the Bombay Stock Exchange 100 index. What is the implication? The implication is that investing in index funds or ETFs is perhaps the best way to go for most Indian investors who want to participate in equities through the mutual fund route. Here then is the writing on the wall. Fund outperformance is random, and predicting an outperforming mutual fund may be as challenging as the stock selection process. Therefore, investing via a systematic, low-cost passive route is a better bet. Portfolio management service, like a mutual fund, invests on behalf of clients. There are two kinds of schemes offered by PMS: discretionary schemes and non-discretionary schemes. In a discretionary scheme, the portfolio manager has complete freedom to decide what to buy, what to sell, when to buy, when to sell. In a non-discretionary scheme, the portfolio manager renders advice only when the client accepts the advice. The portfolio manager implements the recommendation. It is advisable to go for the discretionary scheme because it gives the portfolio manager the required latitude to manage the portfolio effectively. What are the differences between PMS and mutual funds? Minimum investment. Currently, as per SEBI rules, the minimum investment required for PMS participation is rupees 50 lakh, whereas it is just rupees 5,000 for a mutual fund scheme. Fees. PMS has greater freedom in designing the fee structure. Often they provide investors a choice between various fee structures. For example, they may provide an option of a fixed fee of about 2% of the corpus, or a combination of a fixed fee of 1% and a variable fee which is linked to performance. As far as mutual fund schemes are concerned, they charge the same fee to all investors. Taxation. Mutual funds are more tax efficient because mutual funds are not taxed at the fund level. Only when there is a distribution, the investor pays taxes, or only when there is a redemption, the investor pays taxes. As far as PMS is concerned, it is less tax efficient because PMS is regarded as a pass-through vehicle, and all the gains and losses of the PMS are immediately transferred to the individual. Information availability. More information is available in public domain about mutual funds. Less information is available about PMS. 7. Invest on your own if you have the skill and the temperament. Dr. Bernstein, an eminent investment practitioner in the US, applies a four-way test to determine whether a person should invest on his own or invest through a mutual fund or a collective investment vehicle. According to him, a person should invest on his own if he satisfies four criteria: interest in investing, math skills, knowledge of financial history, and temperament. He says that only 10% of the population has interest in investing, only 10% of the population has math skills, only 10% of the population has knowledge of financial history, and only 10% of the population has temperament for investing. So if we multiply point 0.1 with point 0.1 with point 0.1 with point 0.1, we get 0.0001, which means only 1 in 10,000 would satisfy all the four criteria. Of course, this is a very, very stiff test. In my experience, I find that out of 100, maybe 2 to 5 persons have the ability to invest on their own. The rest of them are well advised to invest through mutual funds or collective investment vehicles, which are fairly well managed. As far as equity selection using fundamental analysis is concerned, two broad approaches are available: shotgun approach and rifle approach. Shotgun approach is embodied in Greenblatt's magical formula that we discussed in an earlier session. According to this formula, companies are ranked on the basis of ROIC and price earnings multiple, and selection is made. According to rifle approach, a detailed evaluation of a target company is done, as is done by Warren Buffett. If you wish to invest on your own, follow these principles. Stay within your circle of competence. You'll have to identify the kinds of companies that you can understand given your background and professional interest. To apply value filters such as return on equity, return on capital employed, compound annual growth rate in sales and profits, price earnings multiple, earnings per share, dividends per share, market capitalization. Read annual report thoroughly because annual report provides a lot of valuable information for investors. For follow the GAP principle. GAP means growth at reasonable price. If you can identify growing companies at reasonable prices which satisfy certain criteria that you find useful and stay within your circle of competence, you have a reasonable chance of succeeding in managing your own investments. If you do not have the ability to do so, you're well advised to go to a mutual fund or a collective investment vehicle. Warren Buffett says that he uses four criteria as filters. Can I understand it? Does it look as if it has some kind of sustainable competitive advantage? Is the management composed of able and honest people? Is the price right? As we have learned in our session on corporate valuation, the techniques of valuation can be divided into three broad categories. Balance sheet techniques, which use book value, liquidation value, and replacement cost. Discounted cash flow techniques, which use dividend discount model and free cash flow model. Relative valuation techniques, which use price earnings ratio, price to book ratio, and price to sales ratio. If you wish to invest on your own, these are the do's. Develop a method based on common sense. Use a checklist of 3 to 5 factors. Start very small. Stick to your method at all costs and temptations. As you learn from your experience and refine your approach, step up your commitment gradually over a period of time. These are the don'ts. Don't ask for anyone's opinions. Don't ask for tips and insider information. Don't fall for media reports. There are two broad approaches to equity analysis: technical analysis and fundamental analysis. Technical analysis is based on the assumption that an analysis of historical market data relating to prices and volumes is helpful in forecasting short-term price movements. Fundamental analysis is based on the assumption that an analysis of fundamental factors is helpful in establishing intrinsic value. If there is a discrepancy between intrinsic value and prevailing market price, the same can be exploited by long-term investors. Thus, technical analysis predicts short-term price movements, focuses on internal market data, appeals to short-term traders, and fundamental analysis establishes long-term values, focuses on fundamental factors, and appeals to long-term investors. Many seasoned investors rely on a combination of fundamental analysis and technical analysis. A fundamental analysis suggests that the stock is undervalued and technical analysis indicates a weak position. Then the recommended course of action is to wait. If fundamental analysis suggests that the stock is undervalued and technical analysis indicates a strong position, then the recommended course of action is to buy. If fundamental analysis suggests that the stock is overvalued and technical analysis indicates a weak position, then the recommended course of action is to sell. If the fundamental analysis suggests that the stock is overvalued and technical analysis indicates a strong position, then the recommended course of action is to wait. There are several obstacles in the way of an analyst: inadequacies or incorrectness of data, future uncertainties, irrational market behavior. In selecting debt instruments, rely on three things primarily: credit rating, yield to maturity, and maturity and duration of the instrument. In our session on behavioral finance, we learned about the biases we are prone to. These biases impair investment performance, so a conscious effort must be made to check our irrationality in the game of investment. As human beings, we are endowed with certain characteristics of mind and behavior that lead to imperfect decisions and even dreadfully serious mistakes. Often we are not rational and we do not act in our own best interest. For example, we ignore the base rate in preference to the case rate. We overreact to good news as well as bad news. We are impatient. We tend to be over optimistic and not realistic. We are proud and unwilling to admit our mistakes. We are susceptible to hot tips in investing. We naively believe in foolproof schemes. We easily succumb to herd mentality. In a very insightful paper titled A Portrait of an Individual Investor, Werner de Bond, an eminent financial economist, made these observations about investor behavior. Perception of price movement. Investors spot trends and see patterns where none exist, naively extrapolate immediate past experience onto future, perceive likely variation from equity returns to be narrow, tend to be overconfident in their prediction. Perception of value. Investors have an inadequate understanding of valuation techniques. Investor value based on popular models and stories that they hear in news media. Investors can't distinguish good companies from good stocks. Managing risk and return. Investors are often under-diversified. The idea that risk is defined at a portfolio level is alien to many investors. Investors tend to overinvest in riskless assets. Investors believe that after they have committed funds, they can manage risk through knowledge and trading skills. Trading practices. Seasoned traders have the discipline to use stop loss order effectively. Most individual investors, however, lack such discipline. They trade on impulse and their trading sentiment trails the market. Here are some important guidelines for overcoming psychological biases. Focus on the big picture. The big picture is concerned with the strategic asset mix. As we have learned, the strategic asset mix decision should be guided by the investment horizon and the risk tolerance of the investor. Spend as much time and effort as you require to hammer out the strategic asset mix properly. Rely on words and numbers, not sights and sounds. Words and numbers activate the reflective brain. Sights and sounds activate the reflexive brain. So go through the annual report, do basic quantitative calculation. Don't rely on what is recommended on TV channels through sights and sounds. Use a checklist. It is very essential that you have a checklist of qualitative and quantitative criteria that you apply for any investment opportunity. Diversify adequately. Diversification is the only free lunch available in finance. Do not forecast stock prices. Stock prices are inherently non-forecastable. It is futile to forecast stock prices. Control your investment environment. Insulate yourself from the noise of the market. Look at your portfolio maybe once in a month and take whatever decisions you want to, rather than watch the market and churn the portfolio all the time. Strive to earn market returns. If the market is likely to deliver a return of 11 to 12%, aim at earning 11 to 12%. Don't be overreaching and overambitious and aim at 20%, 25%. Rebalance the portfolio. From time to time, you need to review and rebalance your portfolio. A word about each of them. To focus on the big picture, develop an investment policy statement and maintain an investment diary. Human memory tends to change as it is not always an accurate description of facts and autobiographical events. There are two possible ways to address memory flaws: investment policy statements and investment diaries. The investment policy statement provides long-term guidance and can save investors from making investment decisions which are not aligned with long-term goals. Well-defined rules and limitations help in mitigating biases. Investment diaries protect investors against misattributions or suggestibility. Quantitative discipline is essential. Remember the wise words of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Numbers serve to discipline rhetoric. Without them, it is too easy to follow flights of fancy, to ignore the world as it is, and remold it near the heart's desire. Whatever approach you use, Work with a checklist. The importance of checklist was highlighted by Atul Gawande in his best-selling work, The Checklist Manifesto. Diversify adequately. As we have learned, the relationship between diversification risk is shown in this diagram. There are two sources of risk: market risk, which is also called systematic risk, and unique risk, which is also called unsystematic risk. Market risk emanates from economy-wide factors such as interest rate, inflation rate, exchange rate, growth rate of economy, and so on. Unique risk stems from company-specific factors. Since company-specific factors are not correlated, if you have a diversified portfolio, you can wash away unsystematic risk. But however diversified your portfolio may be, you can't wash away market risk. Empirically, it has been found that 15 to 20 stocks enable the investor to wash away a very substantial portion of unsystematic risk or unique risk. So as a practical suggestion, if you're running your own portfolio, have a diversified portfolio comprising about 15 stocks or so. If you are very skillful, you can run an even more concentrated portfolio. But if you are somewhat less skillful, you may have a portfolio of up to 25 securities. Going beyond 25 makes the whole job very unwieldy, unmanageable, and inefficient. Do not forecast stock prices. Stock prices are inherently non-forecastable. Yet we want to predict and forecast all the time because we suffer from a malaise called prediction addiction. If you also have a desire to forecast, I will recommend a simple technique. Take a rupee coin and toss it every day. If it shows head up, forecast the market will go up. If it shows head down, forecast the market will go down. Do it repeatedly over a period of time. The law of randomness will ensure that you are right 50% of the time, wrong 50% of the time. Crow about your successes, quietly bury your failures. People are not interested in examining in great detail your track record. Over a period of time, if you do it repeatedly, you will acquire some reputation because you would highlight your successes and bury your failures. I'm reminded of a very interesting story. Years ago, I was teaching a course on investments in the US, and I gave a very simple examination where participants were asked to answer 200 questions, and it was a multiple choice examination. Actually, there were only two options, true, false, for most of the questions. There was one student by name John. He had not prepared for the examination. For the first 5-10 minutes, he looked very confused. Then a brilliant idea dawned on him. He took out a 50-cent coin and started flipping it. If the coin showed head up, he would mark the answer as true. If the coin showed tail up, he would mark the answer as false. And he finished his question paper ahead of others because he didn't have to think about the right answer. After 3 hours, he came to my office. He said, "Sir, I want to have a look at my paper." I gave him the paper and started doing that again. He started the process again. He tossed a coin. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm checking the answers." Uh, I am also reminded of a very interesting personal uh, uh, experience. Some time back, I was looking at the quotations page in Economic Times. My wife asked me, "You have been doing it for so many years now. Why do you do it?" I said, "I have a portfolio, so I just want to monitor the portfolio." Then she asked me a very profound question. She said, "Can you tell me what makes the market go up or come down?" I was surprised to get a question like this from her because she was singularly disinterested in financial matters all these years. She had easy access to my wallet. All her financial problems ended because she had easy access to my wallet, and all my financial problems began there. Initially, I want to duck the question, but then I realized that here is a once in a lifetime opportunity of lecturing to my wife. Normally, I am at the receiving end, so I studied my classes in a truly professorial manner and said the stock market is influenced by a multitude of forces like the election outcome in the US, the progress in developing a vaccine for COVID-19, the stimulus package announced by various countries around the world, the mounting fiscal deficit in India, the monetary policy of Reserve Bank of India, and so on. She cut me short and said, if you don't know the answer, just say so. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the extent of my ignorance about stock market behavior, but I have to pretend that I know a lot. Let me reiterate a point made earlier. There are three kinds of forecasters: those who do not know, those who do not know that they do not know, those who know that they do not know but pretend that they know. Control the controllable. While you have no control over whether the stocks or funds you pick will produce superior returns, you can control your expectations by setting realistic expectations. Your risk by asking how much can you lose if you are wrong. Your readiness by making sure you adhere to an investing checklist. Your expenses by avoiding mutual funds with high management fees. Your commissions by trading infrequently. Your taxes by extending your investment period to at least 1 year. Your own behavior by not succumbing to the prediction addiction. Periodically review and rebalance. Periodic review and rebalancing. It is important to periodically review and rebalance a portfolio. Suppose your strategic asset mix is 50% in stocks and 50% in bonds, and you have an initial portfolio which is worth rupees 100 lakhs divided between stocks and bonds equally, 50 lakhs in stocks and 50 lakhs in bonds. After 6 months, you find that the stocks component has appreciated dramatically to 80 lakhs because the market has been euphoric, but the bond component has remained at 50. At this point of time, your portfolio is worth 130 lakhs. You are advised to rebalance the portfolio in line with your strategic mix of 50-50 and sell some stocks and buy some bonds. But very few people do that because when they see such a meteoric rise in stock portfolio, they become greedy and they expect the stocks to perform well because we tend to extrapolate immediate past experience onto future. In order to contain greed, rebalancing is essential. Let us say you rebalance and your portfolio has 65 lakhs of stocks and 65 lakhs in bonds. When you do the next review after 6 months, you find that the stocks component declines by nearly 25% to 50 lakhs. This also happens occasionally in the market. We have seen during the COVID crisis, the market collapsed significantly, but the bond component rises gently to 70 lakhs. At this point of time, you are advised to sell 10 lakhs of bonds and buy 10 lakhs of stocks in line with your strategic asset mix of 50-50. However, very few people do that because when they see the stocks collapse by 25% or so, they are gripped by fear. They are not inclined to step up commitment to stocks. But a systematic rebalancing is essential to overcome fear. The purpose of various guidelines discussed above is to enhance one's emotional intelligence, which Daniel Goleman, the author of the best-selling book Emotional Intelligence, believes can matter more than IQ. According to Daniel Goleman, emotional intelligence is mainly the ability to identify one's emotions as well as those of others, and the components of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. It depends largely on the prefrontal cortex and the strength of its relationship with the limbic system. The importance of emotional intelligence cannot be overemphasized. People commonly associate strategy with rational thinking and other high level functions of the prefrontal cortex, such as anticipation, probability assessment, risk appraisal, pattern recognition, and abstract thinking. But researchers have found that best strategic thinkers show more activity in parts of the brain such as the insula, the anterior ungulate cortex, and the superior temporal sulcus, which are associated with emotion, intuition, empathy, and emotional intelligence. I often say that Lord Vishnu embodies emotional intelligence. Look at this picture. Vishnu is reclining on a serpent which is floating on a turbulent sea. Vishnu, however, is calm, composed, and serene despite so much of turbulence around. Who is serving Vishnu? Goddess of wealth, Lakshmi is serving Vishnu. Lakshmi is supposed to be very fickle. The idol of Lakshmi is often tied to the floor or the wall because Lakshmi is supposed to be very fickle. But in this picture, Lakshmi is serving Vishnu faithfully and steadfastly. What does this picture convey? It means that however violent and turbulent the financial environment may be, if you're calm, composed, and serene and follow a certain policy steadfastly, prosperity is assured in the long run. As an equity investor, you will inevitably experience losses from time to time. No investor, no matter how skillful, can escape bone crushing losses at times, even when taking the most prudent market risks. All investors, amateurs or professionals, are well served by the words of John Maynard Keynes. He said, I would say that it is from time to time the duty of the serious investor to accept the depreciation of his holdings with equanimity and without reproaching himself. IQ and emotional intelligence. Whereas we are born with a certain level of IQ, native intelligence, that does not change much after the teenage years. Emotional intelligence is largely learned. Over time, we can improve our ability to manage our impulses and emotions, to motivate ourselves, and to be socially aware. The old-fashioned terms for this process are character, maturity, and temperament. The thrust of our discussion is on improving the process of portfolio management. However, there is no one-to-one correlation between the quality of process and investment outcome. Outcome is a function of quality of process as well as luck, as this table shows. Process may be good, process may be bad. Outcome may be good, outcome may be bad. If the process is good and outcome good, it is deserved success. If the process is good and outcome bad, it is bad break. If the process is bad and outcome good, it is dumb luck. If process is bad, outcome bad, it is poetic justice. 9. Invest in alternative asset classes if you can. In addition to various investments that we have discussed, there are several other investment possibilities. They are referred to as alternative investments. The more important of alternative investments are commercial property, farmland, suburban land, holiday home, timeshare in a resort, REITs and InvITs, gold and silver, precious stones, art objects, private equity funds, and hedge funds. They are collectively referred to as alternative investments. The important characteristics of alternative investments are: 1. Low correlation with traditional investments such as stocks and bonds. 2. Considerable investment analysis is required before purchasing. 3. Limited historical risk and return data. 4. Relative illiquidity. 5. High transaction costs. 6. Difficulty in determining the current value of the asset. Real estate and gold form a very substantial proportion of the wealth of Indians. The reasons for the popularity of real estate and gold are: 1. Inheritance and endowment effect. 2. Unaccounted money. 3. traditional distress in equity market, which is called as satta bazar by many. 4. Lack of daily quotes so investors don't suffer loss aversion. 5. Easy to imagine they have high value. 6. Solidity. Allure of real estate, appreciation over time, inflation indexed income, tax break on financing. Problems in real estate investment, big ticket long term investment, cumbersome paperwork, high transaction costs, legal hassles, maintenance effort. Among various forms of real estate, commercial property seems to be quite attractive for the following reasons. 1. The rental yield is reasonable. 2. Loans are available for buying commercial property and the interest on loan is tax deductible. 3. A standard deduction equal to 30% of the annual rental value is tax deductible. 4. Property management services are available. Investing in gold. Many consider gold to be a good hedge against investment and suggest that a portion of wealth must be invested in gold. I am not much enamored of gold because historically gold has not provided an attractive post-tax return over a long period of time. Of course, there are periods when gold provides a very attractive rate of return, but if you look at the long-term investment performance of gold, there is nothing to write home about. In my case, I occasionally invest in gold not because I consider gold to be a good investment, but because I have wifely pressure to do that. I invest in gold to maintain matrimonial harmony rather than to improve my investment returns. You can take exposure to gold in the following ways: physical gold, e-gold, gold ETFs, gold funds, gold futures, and sovereign gold bonds. If you want to take exposure to gold, the best option according to me is the sovereign gold bond scheme of Government of India. Issued by the Government of India, sovereign gold bonds have the following features. Minimum investment is 1 gram and maximum investment is 500 grams. Tenure is 8 years, tradable through NSE and BSE. Interest rate is 2.75%, payable semi-annually. Capital gains are tax exempt on redemption. These bonds are available in demat and paper form at all bank branches, select post offices, NSE, BSE, and Stock Holding and Clearing Corporation of India Limited. 10. Maximize your lifetime financial success. There are 5 stages or dimensions of your lifetime financial success: earning, saving, investing, contributing, estate planning. You should strive to maximize achievement in each of these areas within the set of opportunities available to you while enjoying a full and balanced life. If you have resources in excess of what you wish to transfer to your family and others you care about, you have rewarding opportunities to contribute to worthwhile causes. You may find great fulfillment in converting your financial resources, which represent the stored values of your hard work, skills, and good fortune, into actions that advance causes that you truly care about. Here are some possibilities: provide scholarship to young children who are economically deprived, support hospitals and shelter homes that help the needy and indigent, contribute to organizations engaged in scientific or medical research, espouse institutions that work for environmental causes. Before I talk about how to think about money and the relationship between money and happiness, let me underscore 3 key psychological realities. Hedonic treadmill. On a physical treadmill, irrespective of how fast you run, you remain stationary. Similarly, on a hedonic treadmill, how fast you run, you remain stationary. What does it mean? It essentially means that additional income or wealth is not likely to provide significantly higher levels of happiness. In the US, they have found empirically that income rises up to $75,000 per year do bring about significant increase in the level of happiness, but beyond $75,000 a year, additional income brings very little additional happiness. This is referred to as the hedonic treadmill phenomenon. Hedonic misestimation. We tend to misestimate the joy that we are likely to derive from a huge gain. Likewise, we misestimate the sorrow that we'll suffer from a huge loss. Psychological immune system, just the way we have a physical immune system that protects us against infections, we have a psychological immune system which kicks in when we encounter adversity or financial failure. As the eminent Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert said, very few experiences affect us for more than 3 months. When good things happen, we celebrate for a while and then sober up. When bad things happen, we weep and whine for a while and then pick ourselves up and get on with it. Here are some suggestions on how to think about money. Reduce your desires, simplify your lifestyle, develop multiple sources of income, build financial freedom at the earliest, gradually increase your expenditure over time to avoid hedonic treadmill, gather experiences, not objects, regard yourself as a trustee, contribute generously for worthwhile causes. Considerable research has been done on the relationship between money and happiness in the last few decades. The key findings are shown here. Money can buy happiness, but not nearly as much as we imagine. We place too high a value on possessions and not enough on experiences. Spending money on others can deliver greater happiness than spending it on yourself. We are often happier when we have less choice, not more. Working hard toward our goals can bring great pleasure, but achieving our goals is often a letdown. Satisfaction through life appears to be U-shaped, with reported happiness falling through our 20s and 30s, hitting bottom in our 40s, and bouncing back from there. To sum up, compounding is the most powerful force in the world of investing. The most common investment mistakes stem from deeply ingrained cognitive and behavioral biases. The market is a pendulum that swings back and forth through the median line of rationality. The greatest of all gifts is to estimate things at their true worth. Portfolio management is neither art nor science but a problem in engineering. The asset allocation decision is the most important determinant of long-term investment performance. Diversification is perhaps the only free lunch available in economics. In the dynamic world of investing, periodic review and rebalancing are essential. In the field of investments, temperament often trumps intelligence. There are hundreds and hundreds of books on personal investment management. I would recommend two of them: A Random Walk Down Wall Street, The Time-Tested Strategy for Successful Investing by Princeton professor Burton Malkiel, and Winning the Loser's Game, Timeless Strategies for Successful Investing by Charles T. Ellis. Now for a little fun, let us look at the bare lexicon. P. Plunge endless. EBITDA, exit before it tumbles down again. QIB, quixotic Indian blunder. HNI, has no idea. FII, furious impoverished investors. PMS, premeditated scam. SIP, suicide by investing patiently. Fund manager, last year's A stock picker, now locked up in an asylum. Investor, someone who is broke. Broker, worse off than an investor. Correction, the next day after you bought shares. Momentum buying, the art of buying high and selling low. Value buying, the art of buying low and selling even lower. Thank you.